There are several potential reasons why the added receptacle below the countertop on the island was touted by the authority having jurisdiction, or AUJ. Firstly, the electrical code requirement may be the reason. The 2020 National Electrical Code, or NEC, requires dedicated circuits for specific appliances, including ranges, dishwashers, and refrigerators. A blower motor on a gas grill may be considered an appliance that requires a dedicated circuit. Secondly, a shared neutral issue might be the cause. If the receptacle below the countertop is connected to the same neutral as the SAC receptacle, it could potentially cause an issue with shared neutrals. This occurs when multiple circuits share the same neutral conductor, which can lead to voltage fluctuations and electrical problems. Thirdly, a location of the receptacle could be the problem. The receptacle may be located too close to the gas grill, which could pose a fire hazard if the grill were to leak gas. The NEC requires at least 18 inches of clearance between a receptacle and a gas appliance. Several possible solutions exist. Firstly, install a dedicated circuit. Install a separate circuit dedicated solely to the gas grill and its blower motor. This will ensure that the grill has the necessary power and prevent shared neutral issues. Secondly, separate neutral conductors should be used. If it's not possible to install a dedicated circuit, ensure that the receptacle below the countertop has its own neutral conductor separate from the SAC receptacle. Thirdly, relocate the receptacle. Move the receptacle further away from the gas grill to meet the required clearance distance. Further considerations should be made as well. Check with the AHA to determine their specific concerns and whether there are any additional requirements for the island installation. Consult with a licensed electrician to ensure that all electrical work meets code requirements and is safe for use. Considering dedicated circuits, Section 210.23. A1 of the National Electrical Code, or NEC, addresses branch circuits supplying single outlets. This section states that a 15 amp or 20 amp branch circuit shall be permitted to supply lighting units or other utilization equipment, or a combination of both, and shall not exceed 80% of the branch circuit ampere rating. This means that for a 15 amp circuit, the maximum load should not exceed 12 amps, and for a 20 amp circuit, the maximum load should not exceed 16 amps. If the gas grill blower motor and igniter draw a significant amount of current, they could exceed the 80% limit when combined with other loads on the SAC, necessitating a dedicated circuit. Regarding shared neutral circuits, also known as multi-wire branch circuits, can cause issues if not properly installed or loaded. If the neutral conductor is undersized or if the loads on each leg of the circuit are unbalanced, it can lead to voltage fluctuations, overheating, and even electrical fires. Section 300.13. B of the NEC requires that the continuity of the neutral conductor shall not depend on device connections such as lamp holders, receptacles, and switches. This means that the neutral conductor must be continuous and unbroken, even when devices are removed or disconnected. If the added receptacle is connected in a way that interrupts the continuity of the neutral conductor, it could create a dangerous situation. With respect to receptacle placement, Section 517.13 of the NEC covers the location of receptacles in healthcare facilities, but it provides general guidance on receptacle placement. It requires that receptacles be readily accessible and located in a way that minimizes the risk of physical damage. While this section doesn't specifically address the placement of receptacles near gas appliances, it does highlight the importance of considering safety and accessibility when locating receptacles. In the context of a gas grill, placing a receptacle too close to the grill could expose it to excessive heat, moisture, or physical damage, which could create a fire or shock hazard. Therefore, maintaining a safe distance between the receptacle and the grill is essential. When installing a dedicated circuit, you will need to follow several steps. Firstly, determine the load requirements. Calculate the total amperage required by the gas grill and its blower motor. Refer to the appliance's nameplate for this information. Secondly, select the appropriate circuit breaker. Choose a circuit breaker with an amperage rating that matches the appliance's requirements. For example, if the gas grill requires 15 amps, select a 15 amp circuit breaker. Thirdly, install the circuit breaker. Turn off the main power breaker and install the new circuit breaker in the electrical panel. Fourthly, run the wiring. Run a new cable from the circuit breaker to the location of the receptacle. Use the appropriate gauge wire for the circuit amperage. For example, use 14 gauge wire for a 15 amp circuit and 12 gauge wire for a 20 amp circuit. Fifthly, install the receptacle. Connect the wiring to the receptacle, ensuring that the neutral, hot, and ground wires are properly connected. Sixthly, test the circuit. Turn on the main power breaker and test the receptacle with a circuit tester to ensure that it is properly wired and functioning correctly. When separating neutral conductors, if it's not possible to install a dedicated circuit, you can separate the neutral conductors for the ATED receptacle and the SAC receptacle. This will prevent shared neutral issues and ensure that each receptacle has its own dedicated neutral path. To do this, run a separate neutral wire from the ATED receptacle back to the electrical panel. Connect this neutral wire to the neutral bus bar in the panel, separate from the neutral wire for the SAC receptacle. Make sure that the neutral wires are properly labeled to avoid confusion. Relocating the receptacle is also a viable option. If the receptacle is located too close to the gas grill, you can relocate it to a safer distance. The NEC recommends maintaining a minimum of 18 inches of clearance between the receptacle and the gas appliance. To relocate the receptacle, turn off the power to the circuit and disconnect the wiring from the existing receptacle. Extend the wiring to the new location and install the receptacle, ensuring that the neutral, hot, and ground wires are properly connected. Test the receptacle to ensure that it is properly wired and functioning correctly. In addition to the above considerations, there are some other factors to keep in mind. Firstly, grounding. Ensure that all electrical components are properly grounded. This will help to prevent electric shock and ensure the safe operation of the electrical system. Secondly, GFCI protection. Consider using a ground fault circuit interrupter, or GFCI, receptacle for added safety. GFCI receptacles are designed to detect ground faults and quickly interrupt the circuit, preventing electric shock. Thirdly, labeling. Clearly label all circuit breakers and receptacles to indicate their purpose. This will help to avoid confusion and make it easier to troubleshoot electrical problems. Fourthly, professional installation. If you are not comfortable performing electrical work yourself, it is best to hire a licensed electrician to do the job. The electrical work can be dangerous, and it is important to ensure that it is done safely and correctly. With respect to the authority having jurisdiction, or OJ, the AHA is responsible for enforcing the electrical code in your area. The AHA may have specific requirements or interpretations of the code that you need to be aware of. It is always a good idea to check with the AHA before starting any electrical work to ensure that you are in compliance with all applicable codes and regulations. Some jurisdictions have specific requirements for islands and peninsulas, which might influence the inspector's decision. Requirements for GFCI protection may vary by location, and the inspector could be enforcing a local amendment. Inspectors sometimes focus on details that might seem minor but are important for safety. Discussing the specifics with the inspector will clarify their concerns and help in finding a suitable solution. Here's a more detailed breakdown of potential code issues and solutions when dealing with the receptacle installed on an island with a gas grill. First, let's clarify the relevant sections of the National Electrical Code, or NEC. The NEC is a comprehensive set of standards that aims to ensure the safe installation of electrical wiring and equipment. It is updated every 3 years, so it's important to reference the specific edition adopted by your local jurisdiction. Section 210.8 addresses ground fault circuit interrupter, or GFCI protection. GFCI protection is required for receptacles in certain locations to protect against electrical shock. For dwelling units, GFCI protection is generally required for receptacles in bathrooms, garages, and outdoors, and anywhere within 6 feet of a sink. The NEC doesn't explicitly require GFCI protection for all receptacles on an island, but local amendments might. If the receptacle is within 6 feet of a sink on the island, GFCI protection is mandatory. Solution: install a GFCI receptacle or a GFCI circuit breaker to protect the receptacle. This can be a simple fix if it hasn't already been done. Section 210.11 C3 covers island and peninsula countertops. This section mandates specific receptacle placement on islands and peninsulas. At least one receptacle must be installed within 2 feet of the outer end of a peninsula countertop space that is 12 inches or wider. At least one receptacle must be installed at each island countertop space with a long dimension of 24 inches or greater and a short dimension of 12 inches or greater. Receptacle should be located above, but not more than 20 inches above, the countertop. The added receptacle could be non-compliant with these requirements if it doesn't meet the spacing or height rules. Solution: ensure the receptacle meets the spacing and height requirements. If it doesn't, relocate it to comply with the code. If the new receptacle was simply added to an existing circuit without considering the total load, it could overload the circuit. Section 220 provides guidelines for calculating branch circuit, feeder, and service loads. If the existing circuit is already heavily loaded, adding another receptacle could cause the circuit breaker to trip frequently, or worse, overheat the wiring. Solution: calculate the total load on the circuit, including the gas grill blower, igniter, and any other appliances or devices connected to the circuit. Ensure that the total load does not exceed 80% of the circuit breaker's rating. If it does, install a dedicated circuit for the gas grill. The NEC generally requires that appliances be readily accessible for servicing and maintenance. Placing a receptacle in a hard-to-reach location could violate this principle. Solution: ensure that the receptacle is readily accessible without having to move appliances or equipment. If it's not, relocate it to a more accessible location. The NEC requires that electrical work be performed in a neat and workmanlike manner. Sloppy wiring or improperly installed devices could be a code violation. Solution: ensure that all wiring is neatly arranged and properly secured. Use appropriate connectors and fittings and follow the manufacturer's instructions for installing devices. If the receptacle is located near a gas line or other hazardous materials, it could pose a safety risk. The NEC requires that electrical equipment be installed in a manner that minimizes the risk of fire or explosion. Solution: maintain a safe distance between the receptacle and any gas lines or hazardous materials. Consult with a qualified electrician or gas fitter to ensure compliance with all applicable codes and regulations. Here are more detailed reasons for the HA tag, possible solutions, and further NEC references. Firstly, circuit overload considerations. Evaluate the existing circuit's capacity. The inspector might be concerned that adding a receptacle to the SAC circuit overloads it. Section 210.22 addresses permissible loads. A general-purpose 20-amp circuit can have multiple outlets, but the total load should not exceed 16 amps. That's 80% of the breaker rating. Calculate the existing load in the SAC circuit. Include all known appliances and devices regularly used on that circuit. Check the amperage rating of the gas grill blower. This information is usually on a label on the appliance. Add the blower amperage to the existing load. If the total exceeds 16 amps, the circuit is overloaded. Secondly, neutral conductor sharing implications. The inspector may be concerned about shared neutral conductors. Section 300.13 B mandates that the continuity of the neutral conductor cannot depend on device connections such as receptacles and switches. If the added receptacle shares the neutral with the SAC and the loads are unbalanced, it can cause the neutral to overheat. Install a dedicated neutral conductor for the new receptacle. Run a separate neutral wire from the new receptacle back to the panel. This ensures that the neutral current is properly balanced and reduces the risk of overheating. Thirdly, location proximity concerns exist. The location of the receptacle near the gas grill could be a hazard. Section 517.13, although specific to healthcare facilities, provides guidance on minimizing hazards in specific locations. While not directly applicable, it illustrates the concern for safety near potential hazards. Relocate the receptacle at least 18 inches away from the gas grill. This minimizes the risk of the receptacle being exposed to heat or gas leaks. Ensure the receptacle is not directly below the grill, where it could be exposed to dripping grease or other contaminants. Fourthly, improper wiring methods may have been used. The inspector might have found issues with the wiring methods used to install the receptacle. Chapter 3 of the NEC covers wiring methods and materials. Ensure the wiring is properly sized for the circuit amperage. Use appropriate connectors and fittings for all connections. Secure the wiring properly to prevent damage or strain. Fifthly, lack of GFCI protection. The inspector might be concerned about the lack of ground fault circuit interrupter or GFCI protection. Section 210.8 requires GFCI protection in specific locations, including kitchens where receptacles are serving countertop surfaces. Install a GFCI receptacle or a GFCI circuit breaker for the circuit. This protects against ground faults and reduces the risk of electric shock. When verifying AHJ concerns, contact the inspector. Speak with the AHJ to understand their specific concerns and code interpretations. This can help you address the issues more effectively and ensure compliance. Ask for specific code references. Request the specific sections of the NEC or local code that the installation violates. This will help you understand the exact requirements and make the necessary corrections. Present your proposed solutions to the inspector. Discuss your plans for correcting the issues with the inspector before making any changes. This ensures that your solutions will meet their approval. Lastly, consulting a licensed electrician is recommended. Hire a qualified electrician to inspect the installation. A licensed electrician can identify any code violations and make the necessary corrections. Ensure the electrician is familiar with local codes and AHJ requirements.